الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. عبد الظاهر inshallah mumkin, or one of the brothers inshallah, is the English copy. We'll have somebody read from that as well inshallah. What page was it? I think 24, 25. Actually, a bookmark for it. We stopped at Amma Ba'd. To proceed or ask for what follows.
State of the
وبعدنا صح.
prior to Islam.
ها؟ ما يعجبني هذا. I wish we circle, huh? لا قبل هذا. To proceed, page 22.
22.
So, as our aada is, inshallah we'll have somebody read a section in Arabic. And today, inshallah, we'll be able to cover a larger portion because of the fact that there isn't much that needs to be explained from the rest of the author's introduction, except a couple of words and a couple of points. So we'll have somebody read a section. We'll see what words, we'll see what they understood from it. Somebody, after that, will ask, are there any Arabic words that people need explained? After that, the brother will read the English, and then we'll translate, hopefully a little bit better than the English is, with some of the explanation, inshallah. فمن يقرأ لنا? Who can read for us? تفضل يا محمد. وبعد.
فإني كنت قد نهيت إما مبتدئا أو مجيبا.
طيب, from the things that we mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned it last time, from the etiquettes of when we read, is that you want to start off Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu, with something like that, and a dua, right? Dua for yourself first. Always start dua with yourself. The Prophet ﷺ, when he would make dua for somebody, he would start with himself. So you make dua for yourself, for your teachers, your parents, someone like that, and then the people that are present as well. We talked about it last class, the things that you do in the introduction, and so don't forget the dua, right? هذه يعني مجلس شهدها الملائكة. This is a gathering where the angels are present. Right, so this is a time to make dua. Hopefully that this dua will be answered. And you don't know where that dua is going to benefit you in your life. فَلَا تَبْخَلْ بِنَا. Don't be stingy from us, please. يكفيك إن شاء الله.
ولمشايخنا وللحاضرين
والمستمعين مثلا. أي أحسن الله عليكم. آمين. And then after that, you always want to tell what we're reading and who said it. فقال الشيخ الإسلام في
اقتضاء الصراط المستقيم لمخالفة أصحاب الجحيم. الحمد شوي. وبعد فإني كنت قد نهيت إما مبتدئا أو مجيبا عن التشبه بالكفار في أعيادهم، وأخبرت ببعض ما في ذلك من الأثر القديم والدلالة الشرعية، وبينت بعض حكمة الشرع في مجانب الكفار من الكتابيين والأميين، وما جاءت به الشريعة من مخالفة أهل الكتاب والأعاجم. وإن كانت هذه القاعدة عظيمة من قواعد الشريعة كثيرة الشعب وإصلاحا جامعا من أصولها كثير.
الأفضل هنا أصلا جامعا.
من أصولها كثير الفروع، لكني نهيت على ذلك بما يسر الله تعالى.
نبهت إنك نهيت.
نبهت على ذلك بما يسر الله تعالى، وكتبت جوابا في ذلك لم يحضرني الساعة، وحصل بسبب ذلك من الخير ما قدر الله سبحانه، ثم بلغني بأخيرة أن من الناس من استغرب ذلك
واستبعد you're right. لمخالفة
عادة
actually be عادة مضاف إليه.
عادة قد نشأوا عليها وتمسكوا في ذلك بعمومات وإطلاقات اعتمدوا عليها فاقتضاني بعض الأصحاب أن أعلق في ذلك ما يكون فيه إشارة إلى أصل هذه المسألة لكثرة فائدتها وعموم المنفعة بها ولما قد عم كثيرا من الناس من الابتلاء بذلك حتى صاروا في نوع جاهلية
You said it right, في نوع جاهلية.
فكتبت ما حضرني الساعة مع أنه لو استوفي ما في ذلك من الدلائل وكلام العلماء واستقريت الآثار في ذلك لوجد فيه أكثر مما كتب.
أحسن الله عليكم. حسبك إن شاء الله. Somebody else read the last paragraph. أنا أكثرت عليك لأن ما شاء الله أحب قراءتك. تفضل. بس الفقرة الأخيرة.
يقول الشيخ ولم أكن أظن أن من خاض في الفقه ورأى إيماءات الشرع ومقاصده وعلل الفقهاء ومسائلهم.
هنا he says ومسائلهم, and I'm trying to remember if there's a نسخة where it says وعلل الفقهاء يعني في مسائلهم, بس ومسائلهم. تفضل.
وعلل الفقهاء في مسائلهم يشك في ذلك بل لم أكن أظن أن من وقر الإيمان في قلبه وخلص إليه حقيقة الإسلام وأنه دين الله الذي لا يقبل من أحد سواه إذا نبه على هذه
هذا خطأ في عندكم بالفتحة. In the book it has it with the fatha, right?
No, there's nothing.
It has nothing. My print has it with the fatha. It should be with a dhamma. إذا
نبه على هذه النكتة إلا كانت حياة قلبه
إلا كانت حياة قلبه
وصحة إيمانه توجب استيقاظه بأسرع تنبيه ولكن نعوذ بالله من رين القلوب وهوى النفوس اللذين يصدان عن معرفة الحق واتباعه.
نعم. أحسن الله عليكم. ماذا استفدتم من هذه؟ أنت عبود ومحمد ماذا استفدتم؟ يعني هذا إذا لخصتم هذا, if you had to make this summarize into a sentence or two, what is this section of the book about?
It's about not imitate or mimic the أعياد or stanza.
So that's what the book is about. But is that what this paragraph is about? Or that what this section is about? Right, that's what the book is about, to not imitate. But is that what this section of the book is about? What is this section of the book about?
This one?
Anybody, like, what is this? So one thing that's always good to do is try to break the book up into, or anything you read, try to break it up into bite-sized pieces. Right, this section of the book is about why the author wrote it. Right, why the author wrote it. Let's see if we understand that better why the author wrote it and the importance of what he wrote. When they write research papers nowadays, they give like a guideline of what you need to do. What they call it, khutatul bahth, the steps in your research. right? What is the format that you're going to follow in your thesis, for example? And from the things that you have to mention in your thesis is sabab al-ta'lif, the reason you wrote the book. Like we talked about last time, some of the things that are necessary in your work, in your written work, why you wrote the book. Ahamiyat al-mawdu', the importance of the topic. Why did this topic deserve somebody to write about it, right? Is it necessary? Do we need to write about it? Another thing they also mention is good to talk about is al-ta'lifat or al-musannafat al-sabiqah, the things that were written before about this topic, right? So that an individual who wants to double check and confirm your work, he can see where you got the information from and can follow up. He can build on it if you left something off. He can correct something if you made a mistake. He can explain something if you left it unclear. So you want to mention why you wrote the book, the importance of what you wrote, and the previous things that have been written about it. These are all things that you should include in your methodology of your writing, your steps in your research. And so this is what this paragraph is about by Shaykh al-Islam, right? Even though this is a contemporary concept that in the way that they do it in their papers nowadays, we see that the Salaf, they used to do this by default, right? When you look at their introductions, these are always things that you're seeing them constantly repeating, right? Why did I write this topic? What's the importance of this topic? Was there anything written in this topic before, right? And like this, we see what the author is doing here. Tafaddal. This is the translation, inshallah.
To proceed, I have warned against the imitation of the rights of the unbelievers.
Of the what?
Of the rights. The imitation of the rights of the unbelievers
Here.
and their festivals.
Okay, the rights of the disbelievers in their festivals. Okay.
Either spontaneously or in the course of my response to some questions. In doing so, I have referred to some of the traditions related thereto, as well as the Sharia legal argument. I also explained some of the motives of the Sharia in avoiding the way of life of the unbelievers among the people of the book and the unlettered nations, and what the Sharia enjoined of the objection to the people of the book and non-Arabs. Although this is a major principle of Sharia with numerous ramifications and a capital root with many branches, nevertheless, I drew attention to it as much as Allah granted me the ability to do it. Though that response I composed on the subject is not available to me now, the result of which created a measure of good effect to Allah-willed extent. However, I was later informed that some people, owing to the diversity of the customs in which they grew up with, found my response to be odd and far-fetched. In this respect, as their basis, they relied on vague, general, and common principles to support their viewpoint. Subsequently, a friend asked me to comment on the subject and thus indicate the root of the issue. This would be highly useful and be of general advantage, particularly considering the issue has affected many people to the extent that they were engaging in practices of pre-Islamic paganism. I therefore put down what occurred to me at the moment. Though, if the issue were treated exhaustively by collecting all the available evidence, the available comments of the scholars, and all the traditions regarding it, the discussion would be found to be far more detailed than what I offered. I had not supposed that whoever delved deeply into the knowledge of Islamic jurisprudence, realizing the indications of Sharia and its primary objectives, and being acquainted with the cause and effect upon which the scholars act, as well as their methods of handling issues, would doubt the correctness of this standpoint. Furthermore, I had not expected that someone whose heart is deeply rooted in faith, and to whom the truth of Islam has reached in its simplicity, that it is the religion of Allah, which no religion would not be accepted from anyone, accepted, that when he is made aware of this position would not heed, rather becomes the life way of his heart. the means of correcting his corrupted faith, and a drive that awakens him. I should say awakens him, I'm sorry. Awakens him in the swiftest manner. However, we seek refuge in Allah from the corruption of hearts and from following one's whims and desires, as both hinder one's ability to learn and follow the faith. The truth, I'm sorry.
Alhamdulillah. هذه ترجمة طيبة. This is a good translation, even though it's free. It's a free translation, meaning they didn't necessarily stick to the way the author worded it, but they presented it. They didn't leave out anything, I don't believe, nor did they error in anything. But they were free in their format of it. The question is, how much clearer is it now? Was it like reading Arabic and English? And this is the case sometimes with bigger books in English. And maybe somebody who speaks English can correct me more on that, but a lot of times reading the book in English is not as clear as it is in reading it in Arabic, let alone getting it explained in Arabic. Huh? And for that reason, it's necessary, even with the translated books and even with the research that you do on your own, to refer back to the people of knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had to take it back to Jibreel and to Allah, right? And if he had to get clarity in the religion, فَكَيْفَ بِنَا, then how about us? So the point of us doing this is to remind us that often we hear people say, I read that book. Or, yeah, I got that book. I've studied that before. And the reality becomes clear that just because you read it, it doesn't equate knowing it, let alone, or should I say, just because you read it, it doesn't equate studying it, let alone knowing it. These are additional steps. And even though you see a lot of times the Muslims, they get together and they have reading classes and let's just get together and read the book. And this is hada shay'un tayyib. This is a good thing, right? You see a lot of times, especially the sisters, they'll get together and they'll just sit and read. And we say, alhamdulillah. But it's necessary for someone to be competent about what's being read, to be able to clarify, because if not, when it comes to religion, there are too many doorways for an individual to slip without proper any foundations and things to base on. So let's take what was said. He said, وَبَعْدُ. We talked about that. فَإِنِّي كُنْتُ قَدْ نَبَّهْتُ. Then indeed, I have previously drawn attention. Right? وَهَذَا شَيْء كَثِيرٌ مِنْ Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. This is something that Shaykh al-Islam used to do often. Right? And that is write and teach people about the religion. And there's very few books of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah or fatwa that he wrote, except that you'll see that he'll say, I wrote in this previously, or I discussed this in another place. Like we talked about last time. Shaykh al-Islam, yani kana, as we can mention, some of them mentioned that from the miracles that Allah blessed Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah with. When you think about a miracle, your default thought is what? A miracle. Which you know what a miracle is, right? Mu'jiza. When you think about a miracle, what is your default thought? Splitting the moon. MashaAllah. Hada mu'jiza, right? When you think about a miracle of a wali, what they call karamat. When it comes from other than the Prophet, they call it a karama, right? So from the Prophet, the word they use is mu'jiza. From other than the Prophet, they call it a karama, right? Because Allah yukrimuhum bihadha shay. Right? And as far as the prophets, then their miracles are meant to render their competition incapable. Right? So they call it a mu'jiza from the prophet, and from the saints, from the awliya, they call it a karama. The point of it is, you think about amazing and astonishing things, right? وَهَذَا هُوَ. But this is a miracle of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. وَهُوَ كَثْرَةُ الْكِتَابِ. The abundance of writing. And subhanAllah, ma a'zamuha karama, how great of a blessing or a miracle it is. Because what's the greatest mu'jiza that the Prophet ﷺ had? What is it? Kalam. The greatest mu'jiza, the greatest miracle that the Prophet had was the Quran. Right? And it's going to be what causes him to have the most followers on the Day of Judgment. And it's going to be the thing that is used against the opponents the most. And it's just a compilation of words. Like in Kalam, Rabbil Alameen. But they're the words of the Lord of all that exists. And if this was the Prophet's greatest miracle, right? And we know that the Prophets came with a miracle that was suitable to their people. And we know that the people in this day and age and previously and in the future, what do we pride ourselves on? What do we think about ourselves as opposed to the people of the past? Knowledge, intelligence, smarts. And if this is the miracle of the Prophet, it shows that his miracle outsmarts them, outthinks them, out-intellects them. And likewise, the greatest of miracles that we could have amongst us would be of the same category as the miracle of the Prophet ﷺ. You see somebody floating in the sky, walking on water. You say, this is amazing, this is a mu'ji, this is a karama. But the effect of that versus the effect of somebody who wrote the way Ibn Taymiyyah did, which one is greater?
Right.
Which one is more miraculous? Right? How did this individual, how was he able to produce the information that he produced? And not just produce it, but have it accepted by generation on generation on generation, until his name became synonymous with the truth. Right? Until his name became synonymous with the truth. Until, unfortunately, and this is a mistake, you have people unsure who was more virtuous, the four Imams or Ibn Taymiyyah. This is an argument. This is a question that people come up with, right? Of course, it's the four Imams. But the point is that what is all of that if not a miracle, right? To show you how Allah blessed this person to reach such levels. So this is often from Shaykh al-Islam. He'll say, I've already talked about this. From the miracles of Shaykh al-Islam and how he would write, how often he would write something between Dhuhr and Asr, between Asr and Maghrib, between Maghrib and Isha. A person would come to him with a question, he would write a book that we still study to this day, like Al-Wasitiyya, like Al-Hamawiyya, like Al-Tadmuriyya. He would write these books right away, right? Just between Salat. A person would come to him with poetry. In it, there's a criticism of the religion, right? Like his Ta'iyya and Al-Qadr, his book of poetry that ends with the word Ta, or the letter Ta in what is predestination, right? He responded to it between between Asr and Maghrib in the same scale of poetry, right? Off the cuff. He was a freestyle genius, right? While nowadays the Kafirs, they have rap battles, how the Ibn Taymiyyah, he was nice with the pen. What is this if it's not a karama? Allah kana yukrimuhu bihadha shay. And he would get his work accepted by the people. So he says, indeed, I have already drawn attention. I've already reminded the people. And in some prints it says, I have already forbidden the people, right? Nabahtu or nahaytu. Indeed, I have already drawn attention. Whether I did that, as they translate in the book, spontaneously, meaning I did it of my own accord. I decided to talk about this. Or I did it as a response to somebody's question. And these are the reasons why a person writes a book. When you want to talk about something, right? A person is either going to see a need that needs to be addressed and thus address it. You look at your community, you look at your circumstances, and you say, the people need to know about this, and thus you take it on yourself to address it. Or an individual would come and ask you a question, and you would respond. And this is a principle they talk about in the way that books are written. And you see it especially in the books of Aqidah. The books of Aqidah are often two types. Either a person is taking it upon himself to clarify the correct Aqidah. He sees an issue and thus he addresses it. Or they are responding to the innovation of the people. And so their book might be laid out more to clarify what is innovation as opposed to establish the correct Aqidah, i.e. responding. And so these are the causes. So he says, indeed, I have already drawn attention, whether of my own to begin with, or as a response to a question. And if I'm not mistaken, this book was written before 700. Right? This book was written before 700, if I'm not mistaken. And so that means Ibn Taymiyyah a time before this, before he's 40, had already written in this topic and was already being sought out from the different areas. People would come to him from all over the Muslim world just to ask him questions. Aqidatul Wasitiyya, Al-Asfahaniyya, right? At-Tadmuriyya, right? All of these books are named after people who were coming from here and there to ask him questions about the religion. So he says, I've already drawn attention to this. I've already drawn attention either from myself to begin with or as a response to a question about a tashabbuh bil kuffar, about resembling the disbelievers. A tashabbuh is to resemble in some aspect. To resemble in some aspect. Right? For example, هذا الكتاب يشبه هذا الكتاب. This book resembles that book. Are they the same in every way? This paper's yellow, this paper's white. This print is older, that print is newer. This book is torn up, that book is in good shape. But they resemble in an aspect or another. As opposed to these two books are what? هذا الكتاب يمثل هذا الكتاب. It is like that book. So a tamthil is a greater resemblance than there is between a tashabbuh. Right? A shabah is to resemble in some aspect, while al-mathal or al-mithl is to resemble in all or most, if not all, aspects. Right? For example, are the food of this life like the food of the next life? But what will we be given in paradise? Mutashabiha wa utu bihi mutashabiha. We'll have food in paradise that resembles this food. But the only thing shared between them is the name. Right? And like this you understand, and it can remove from you some of the confusion that might come when somebody says, well, you all say that Allah has prepared in paradise ma la aynun ra'at wa la udhunun sami'at wa la khatara ala qalbi bashar. What no eye has seen or ear has heard, nor has it come across the heart of any human being. Have they even thought about it? But you all say that we're going to have apples in paradise. I've thought about those. We're going to have gold in paradise, milk in paradise, alcohol in paradise. I've thought about that. I've seen that. So how can it be? And Allah says you'll be given similar. We say, how? You misunderstood the difference between a shabah wal mithl. A shabah, it resembles it in the name only. So you could comprehend. But as far as al-mithl or al-mithl, then this is a resembling and this corresponding in a way that is greater. The point of it here is that what is prohibited, being just like the kuffar or resembling the kuffar? No, here, tashabbuh. I can't be like them in a thing, let alone be all like them, right? That's what you mean by both. But the point is, the prohibition is to be like them in a thing. I can't be like them in a thing. I don't want to be, what's the word? Nothing like them. I want to be no thing like them. I want to be nothing like the kuffar. Right? وَلَا يَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودَ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُم. Right? The Sheikh is going to mention this ayat a lot. And they won't be happy with you, the Jews and the Christians, until you do what? Until you follow their millah. What did that word millah mean? What did that word millah mean? We learned it last time. Dictation is its origin, but we said, what does it mean in this context? Millata Ibrahim, Hanifa. Huh? Well, I can't hear you. No, that's not ummah. Doesn't mean ummah. We said it meant dictation. That's what it means, reality. Because a dictation, it does what? Tell you what to do about what? Every aspect. Right? Al-millah huwa ad-din al-kamil. Right? It's what was dictated to us in every aspect of our life. Salat, zakat, hajj, qada al-hajj, zawaj, bay. All of these things are part of our what? Millah. right? The complete way of life. اليهود والنصارى لا يرضى عنك حتى تتبع ملتهم. Until you follow what? Until you follow them in everything. Doesn't just say deen. They want you to bathe like they bathe, dress like they dress, eat like they eat, sleep like they sleep, go to work like they go to work, celebrate their holidays, think like they think. لا يرضى عنك. They will not be happy with you until when? Until you follow their complete way of life. SubhanAllah. This ayah, it's an azim ayah because the author is going to mention it a lot. قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى. Say the guidance of Allah is the proper guidance. The lifestyle that Allah has chosen for you is the proper lifestyle. They won't be happy until you do what? Follow them in everything. And the lifestyle that Allah has chosen for you is the proper lifestyle. وَلَئِنِ اتَّبَعْتَ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ. And if you were to follow their desires, you notice how Allah differentiates between the cause and the effect there, or the result. He doesn't say if you were to follow their millah, because the millah would be if you were to follow them in everything. If you were to follow any of their desires, right? So we see that there's a difference. The prohibition is resembling them in anything. We as Muslims want to be nothing like the kuffar. No thing like them, right? We want to be no thing like them. Tafadhal.
Should be. I thought you said it resembles some aspects.
Right. Exactly. Islam forbid us to resemble them in any aspect, right? If Islam forbade us to resemble us to be like them, well, I can make the argument, I'm not like them because I don't do this or I don't do that. I just resemble them in these 7 things, but these 3 things I don't do, so I'm not like them. We say, no, Islam forbade us to resemble them from resembling, from tashabbuh, which is, even if I got one thing in common with them, akhi, I got to check that. I got to look at that. I got to figure that out. You see what I'm saying? Because the prohibition, is it from being like them or from resembling them? Resembling. So a tashabbuh is less, it's a lesser comparison than al-mithl. Al-mithl is like this, right? Hand to hand. While a tashabbuh is like my hand and Fadl's hand, right? His hand might stop here on mine. You see what I'm saying? They're both hands, but they're not the same. And so the religion, did it forbid us from being like this with the kuffar or even being like this? You see what I'm saying? The religion forbade us from what? Min at-tashabbuh ya akhi. Right? The religion. And so the Shaykh is saying, I've indeed drawn attention to, either to begin with or as a response, about resembling the kuffar. Right? Even just a little bit, akhi. How you cut your hair? Oh, well, I seen this guy, he cut his hair like this. Akhi, naha shara and tashabbuh bil kuffar. Akhi, it's just a haircut. Akhi, it's just a haircut. What's the big deal? I saw this guy, he cut his hair like this. I like that style. What's the big deal? It's just a haircut. What do we say? It's resembling, akhi. The religion forbade us to resemble. You say, oh, I like this style of shoe. I like this style of dress. I like this type of lifestyle in this fashion or that fashion. We say, akhi, hada tashabbuh. Right? And he's going to clarify to what limit, because obviously there's always going to be some aspect of resemblance. Right? There's going to be some aspect of resemblance. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam, kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. Oh, you have iman. Fasting has been ordained for you, ka, the tashbih, just like, similar to how it was ordained on those before you. So there's going to be some resemblance. But what is the level and what is the limit? And when is it tolerable and when is it not? And the default is what? What is the default? I'll give you a clue. It's the name of the book. The Straight Path. What's the name of the book? What's it mean? What's it mean? That's the first thing we cover. You got to what's the point? Yes. The straight path, what? Demands that you be different than them. You can't be on the straight path and be like them. It's impossible. Because the straight path requires you be different than them. Right? So the default in everything that he talked about, right? Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, the prophet, the religion that he came with, how our hidayah is, all of that was to show that they can't come together. La yajtami'an. Opposites can't come together. Left or up can't be down. They can't be the same. And so the straight path necessitates that we are what? Different. So he says, I've already talked about this in the past, about resembling them, but he talked about it in a specific thing, in their celebrations. I drew attention about resembling them in their celebrations. That's what the previous work was about, just in the celebration. Al-Eid, and he's going to talk about an Eid, so we don't need to go into great detail about it now. But an Eid is called an Eid because it repeats, right? Min adi ya'udu awdan wa Eida, right? Because it repeats. And it can be a time, it can be a place, and it can be an action. Any one of these can be classified as an Eid, a time that repeats, like Eid al-Fitr. It's a time that repeats. A place that repeats. Like the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "La tattakhidhu qabri Eida." Don't take my grave as an Eid. Right? Don't take my grave as an Eid. An action that repeats. Like Salatul Jumu'ah, hada Eid al-Muslimin. It's an action that repeats. And that's inside of a time that repeats. Right? Salat. Right? These are all ayat because they repeat on a schedule. So he says, I've already drawn attention either to begin with or as a response regarding the prohibition of resembling the kuffar in their celebrations. وَأَخْبَرْتُ بِبَعْضِ مَا فِي ذَلِكَ. And I clarified some of what pertains to that topic. I talked about some of it. Some of the things that are relevant in that topic. مِنَ الْأَثْرِ الْقَدِيمِ. From the old athar. The statement of the Salaf. مِنَ الْأَثْرِ الْقَدِيمِ. أي آثار الصحابة والتابعين. That thing that we are, what's the word in English? That thing that we are, yes, but there's a word I'm looking for. It's like we are obsessed with. The thing that we are obsessed with. I am obsessed with قال الله, قال رسول الله, قال الصحابة. Wallah, you're Salafi, right? You're obsessed with those things. How come everything you say is call us so-and-so said and such said? Every time you talk, you don't got no opinions of your own? You can't think for yourself? Every time you say something, it's Abu Bakr said this, Umar said this, Ali said this, Athori said this, Ahmed said this. Akhi, you can't think for yourself? Akhi, I'm obsessed with the Athar al-Qadima. Right? So he says, from the Athar al-Qadim, ومن الأثر القديم, from the old athar, the old transmissions, والدلالة الشرعية, as well as the legislated evidence. What's the legislated evidence? Quran, Sunnah, consensus, right? Legislated evidence. وبينت بعض حكمة الشرع, and I clarified or I illuminated some of the legislated wisdoms. Right? Why should we not be like the kuffar? We all know that Allah said don't do it. But there remains the question, why? And this is a thing that, there's a line here. Allah says, "La yus'alu amma yaf'alu wa hum yus'alun." He's not to be asked about what he does, and they're going to be asked. So can you ask about the wisdom behind an action of Allah? Yes, you can ask about it for clarification and understanding. You cannot ask about it as in the form of a challenge, right? Or as a form of checking and like mandating and overseeing, right? Like you might ask your child, why did you do this? Right? As a form of what? Checking them, mandating on why did you do this, right? La yus'alu amma yaf'alu. Allah doesn't ask why he does something, right? Wa huwa al-ghaniyyul hamid. But can you ask about the wisdom behind the actions of Allah? Yes. You can ask to increase your knowledge and understanding of Allah. And these wisdoms are present, as opposed to the Mu'tazila and other than them who say Allah acts without wisdom. He has no purpose, no goal, no aim. We say, no, Allah, in everything that He does, there is a purpose, there's a goal, and there is an aim. Can you raise that cup up for me, inshallah? I just don't want the cup, I don't want anything spilled out. There is a purpose, there's a goal, there's an aim. And so it's okay to try to understand that. And sometimes we can understand the purpose, the goal, and the aim, right? And this is the majority of the legislation. The majority of the legislation, we can understand why. And that's what allows us to do comparison. Why is alcohol haram? Why is alcohol haram? That's everything is because Allah said so. That is true. But what's the wisdom? These are results. What's the wisdom? Or this is where the words get tricky, because you got certain ones. You got the cause, the wisdom, the reason, the goal, the aim. All of these, and when you study like usul, they all have different meanings, right? The point of it is when we talk about the justification, it's because it intoxicates, right? And I can compare that to other things. There's no ayat about cocaine. There's no hadith about heroin. So how do I get off saying it's haram? Because I can compare, because I look at the cause, the reason, the justification. And that justification is an indicator of the wisdoms, right? Alcohol intoxicates. When you get intoxicated, what does it do?
Can't think straight.
Can't think straight. And when you can't think straight, what happens? You destroy families. You destroy homes. You lose your intellect, right? And that shows us the goals of the religion. The religion came to protect 6 things: your religion, your life, your wealth, your intellect, your lineage, and your honor. And so I can see that the justification leads to the reason, the reason leads to the justification, which leads to the wisdom that clarifies the goal and the aim. So the fact that most actions are like this is what allows us to compare. But there are some actions that we don't know why. It doesn't mean that there isn't wisdom, it just means we don't know why. Why does camel meat break your wudu? Why is dhuhr 4 rak'ah? Right? No matter who you talk to, they'll never be able to answer that. They call this ibadatun mahd, purely worship. We don't know why Allah legislated. And these type of things you can't compare to. So the Sheikh is saying here, I've talked about some of the wisdom. As far as this topic, resembling the kuffar, there are wisdoms here that we can clarify and extrapolate on to be able to set limits and determinations for us. He says, and I clarified some of the wisdoms or the legislated wisdoms regarding staying away from the kuffar. Mujanabat al-kuffar. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Staying away from the kuffar, here what he means is staying away from their lifestyle. He says in his explanation of this, it means to stay away from their lifestyle. Because staying away from them physically is an impossibility. You should stay away from them physically. This is my statement now. You should stay away from them physically to the extent that you can. That's why hijrah was mandated. That's why having your own as a Muslim environment in a community was mandated. We stay away from them in the graveyards. We stay away from them as much as possible. But the religion didn't command us to completely isolate ourselves from them. Instead, we have to interact with them, whether it be on a country level, country to country, whether it be on a personal level to give da'wah, family relations, to do business. Islam does not mandate for us to live as hermits away from the kuffar, right? Islam instead, it encourages us to call them and mix with them, to call them to Islam. But what has it commanded us to avoid and stay away from? Their lifestyle. And so, if mixing with them causes me to match them in their lifestyle, what should I do? I should not mix with them. But if I'm capable of mixing with them for a benefit without it causing me to resemble them, then mixing for that benefit becomes permissible. And like this, you understand the statements of the scholars when they talk about hijrah as an obligation on the Muslims, except in three circumstances: the one who is learning and the one who is doing business, or the one who is calling them and inviting them to Islam, right? We understand that more now. We can understand that principle a little better. We have to stay away from their way of life. And sometimes their way of life, well, billah, this is the trick now that they've figured out. They don't even need to mix with us to mix their way of life. They don't even need to mix with us to mix their way of life. They don't want to come to our countries. They don't want to live in our lands. But they still influence our way of life by sending us their lifestyle. Telecommunications, television, internet, WhatsApp, Telegram, images, items, goods, services. They get to stay away from us, which is their goal. They don't want to mix with us because they know that if they mix with the Muslims too much, لَعَلَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِيهِمْ يَهْدِي عَوَامِهِمْ, like the previous generations of them were guided just from mixing with the Muslims. When you see akhlaq, when you see etiquette, when you see culture, when you see knowledge, when you see wisdom, the nature of a person is going to generally incline to those things. That's the fitrah. But they figured out a way to corrupt us without exposing themselves. And here we are, we let them in. We open the doors. We download the apps. We experience their lifestyle. And this is something that, subhanAllah, he says that, so, and I've also talked about staying away from the kuffar, right? From those who were given the scripture, the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, and the Ummiyeen, those who were unlettered, i.e. the mushrikun. We can't be like them or like them. We have to be different than all types of kufr. And I've clarified what the Sharia came with it from being different than the people of the book and the non-Arabs. So there are three groups. You got a group we got to be different based on religion. And we got a group that we have to be different from based on identity and culture. There's a group that we have to be different because of religion. Who are they? The disbelievers. Whether they be the disbelievers who are given a scripture, who are closer to us, or the disbelievers who weren't given a scripture, the unlettered, the unread. That's what it means, unlettered. They weren't given a book from the mushrikun. We have to be different than them, and this group is categorized by their religion. And then there's a group that we have to be different from in culture. And they are the people who are given the book, the Jews and the Christians, which include the Romans, right? This is the influence over the world. And the non-Arabs, the Persians, and any group of non-Arab people. We've been commanded to be different than them, i.e. in the culture, right? Islam has a culture. Islam has a lifestyle, as the Sheikh is going to talk about later on in the book. And this is a delicate issue. We've been commanded to resemble the Arab. You got to talk Arabic. You have to. Name a language you have to speak. That's wajib for you to speak. Besides Arabic. Do I have to speak Bosnian? Do I have to speak English? Do I have to speak Swahili? No, I can speak any language I want. But when it comes to Arabic, I have to speak Arabic. It's wajib to speak Arabic. You agree or disagree?
It's wajib.
It's wajib. Recite Quran. Why is it different? Can you say all praises to Allah, Lord of the worlds, Master? It's wajib for you to do what? To speak Arabic. I didn't say it's wajib for you to be Sibawayh, to be the scholar of the Arabic language, but it is wajib on every person to speak Arabic. There's no other language like that where you have to know this language, some aspect of this language. And to the extent that you want to know your religion, it becomes even more obligatory. Right? To the extent that you want to know your religion, it becomes even more obligatory. Culturally, we've been commanded to be like the Arabs. The way that we eat. Whose lifestyle was that? Huh? The way that we eat. Arab. The way that we sleep. The way that we drink. Right? You find this, and there's going to be a reason in this. Right? And the generalness of the reason is because whenever Islam left alone from the culture of the Arabs, then this was from the culture of Abraham, from the culture of Ibrahim. Whatever Islam left and didn't touch, then that is from the baqiyatu of Ibrahim. And so we've been commanded to be like them. And thus we can't be like the Jewish identity, nationality. We can't be like the Roman Christian identity, nationality. And we can't be like any of the other non-Arab identities or nationalities. We have to look and see. Now, is there room for culture? Is there room for it in dress and in food preferences and in things like that? We're going to see to the limits of what's acceptable and what's not. But this is something we have to bear in mind, that just like we've been commanded to not be like the kuffar in their deen, we've been commanded to not be like the non-Arab in their culture. And so your default should always be looking, where did they get that from? Was that from the Arabs or was that from the Persians? This holiday, this conversation, this things that we don't even think about. Why is there why do we go to school from September to August? From September to June. Why? Did you think they just came up with that? There's a reason there, right? Why? And we just go along, get along, until we don't even know, right? And you don't know, was it shirk behind that? Was it kufr? Or was it just normal politics and issues of the day? But we still go along to get along. We use their names of their months and their dates. If I ask 12 Muslims, what are the 12 months in Islam in order? How many of us know? Why the deen, ya akhi? Knowing our months is an aspect of our worship. Can you give zakat if you don't know the year? Can you go to Hajj if you don't know the time? Make Ramadan, fast Ramadan if you don't know the months? How many of us know how to recognize the time for Salah? Right? We don't know the basics because we have abandoned our identity as Muslims, even till you find that wa'iyadu billah, from the Arab are those who give up this identity that Allah has blessed them with inherently. Right? They were born this way and they would give it up. They'll change their names to Mo and Sam to conceal Muhammad and Samir or something of this nature. Right? So it's necessary that we be different from both of these groups. طيب. تعبتم, huh? Everybody exhausted? Or we keep going a little bit more, inshallah. طيب. So he said, and indeed, this principle, what's the principle? What about it? Not doing tashabbuh. That's the principle. Tashabbuh is haram. This principle is great, or this great principle is from the greatest principles of the religion. Right? Like they said in the book, it's from the greatest rules in Islam. When we talk about the rules that Islam has, what's one of the biggest ones? No, yes, obviously. I'm saying we're talking about some not being like the kuffar. When you talk about some of the greatest rules in Islam, from the top 10, from the right, if we're playing the best hits of Islam, what's one of those classics? Don't be like the kuffar. If you guys remember the other day, yesterday, the Sheikh talked about how the religion, it came to do these things, to purify our aqidah, to correct our worship, and to rectify our character. You see how that falls in together. One of the greatest principles is something that covers all of these things. Not be like the kuffar. Does that purify our aqidah? Absolutely. Don't be like the kuffar. وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ من الذين تفرقوا من الذين فرقوا دينهم وكانوا شيعا. وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. And don't be like the mushriks, those who separated their religion and ended up in groups. Not being like the kuffar purifies our religion. Worship, does not being like the kuffar fix our worship? Right? وَرُهْبَانِيَّةٌ ابْتَدِعُوهَا مَا كَتَبْنَاهَا عَلَيْهِمْ. And an innovated aspect of monasticism that we didn't legislate for them. Talking about the Christians and that bid'ah that they did. Not being like the Christians purify or rectifies our worship, our character. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Right? Not being like them rectifies our character. So we see why this is a great principle from the principles of Islam. It covers all of the topics. So this great principle is from the greatest legislated principles. Kathiratu sha'b. It has an abundance of branches. You can put it in any category. Any topic, you can include this conversation in it. Right? Whatever Islamic topic you're talking about, we can include in that conversation what? Don't be like the kuffar. That's a rule that you can apply across the board. Akhi, how do I do business? Not like the kuffar. Right? Akhi, what's the best foods? Well, what should I eat for dinner? Not like the kuffar. That's a rule you can apply in everything that comes up to you, and you want to ask yourself the question, the answer of it could be what? Not like the kuffar. That's what it means. It's a rule. You can apply it. It has so many branches. You can apply it to any topic. وَهُوَ أَصْلٌ جَامِعٌ مِنْ أُصُولِهَا. It is a foundation that is all-encompassing from the foundations of the Sharia. They have istilah. In another print, it says asl. And asl makes more sense. Istilah would mean it's a term that is comprehensive. And that makes sense as well. But it being a foundation makes more sense with the context of what Shaykh al-Islam is saying. It is a foundation from the all-encompassing foundations of Islam that has an abundance of branches that come off of it. If this is what we build off of, everything that we build off of it is connected to it. Right? What is the foundation of Islam? Right? Quran, Sunnah, way of the Sahaba. What can you also lay down in those building blocks of your Islam is what? You got Quran, that's one block. Okay. What else am I laying down in my foundation? Sunnah. Boom, I built that. I put that portion. Think about it like a house. That's why they use these words. You're building a house. You dug out the basement. I have an empty area to build on. Can I just start building? What do I need? Foundation. Have you ever seen them build a house? They dig out the basement and they put what in the ground? All those pylons, all of that footer that they build up on top of. So I got one over here. The one in the middle is what? Tawheed. That's my main base. If this one is gone, nothing else will stay. But I got other foundations that I have to build on top of. I got Quran, I got Sunnah, I got Sahaba, I got avoid innovation. One of those foundations is what? Don't be like the kuffar. It's an aslun that encompasses, the whole building is based on this. Aslun jami'un kathiratul furu'. All of the thing is abundant about, it's an abundance of things that can come off of it. If it was a tree, think about how many branches it would have. Right? Kathiratul furu'. In spite of it being this high in its status and this important in its understanding, what does he say? I still had to draw attention to it. Lakinni nabbahtu. Right? I still told the people about it. I don't think I needed to tell the people. It seems like something everybody should know. Does anybody here need a dars on how to say Siraat-il-Ikhlas? Right? You say this is I got that when I was a wee bit, right? Now that doesn't mean we can't get better than Ikhlas and understand the tafsir and the bit, right? But I'm saying I got that already. I learned the shahada. The first thing I did as a Muslim was ashhad, right? I didn't think I needed to tell anybody about that, but I drew attention to it, right? And that's why I just wrote about it real quick, because I didn't think anybody was going to argue. I didn't think anybody was going to debate this point. Who was going to debate that you need wudu to make salah? Who was going to write a book telling me how I was wrong, telling the people they need to have wudu to make salah? Anybody? لكني نبهت على ذلك بما يسر الله تعالى, in a way that Allah made it easy. بما يسر الله تعالى, in a way that Allah made it easy. وكتبت جوابا, and I wrote a response, and this topic لم يحضرني الساعة, that I don't recall at this moment. I don't recall what I wrote in the past. Right? Subhanallah. You ever heard the statement that the scholar will forget more about the religion than you know? Right? I wrote about it and I don't even remember what I wrote. Right? I don't remember what I wrote back then. He forgot. I don't remember what I wrote. Right? Who knows? لم يحضرني الساعة وحصل بسبب ذلك من الخير ما قدره الله سبحانه. And because of that small little answer or response that I wrote, a lot of good came about. People who their natural disposition was to hear and obey, people who had a love for Allah and His Messenger, when they got that information, oh, subhanAllah, that's what I was looking for the whole time. And a lot of good happened to those people. And that's the difference between the believer and the weak believer and the hypocrite. The believer, Kamilul Iman, doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes. Doesn't mean he doesn't err. But when the truth comes to him, what does he do? He accepts it and submits without any big effort being put in it. The weak believer, when the truth comes to him, what does he need with it? A little bit of encouragement. You got to give him a little bit of push. Sometimes you got to wave a carrot for him to come and get it. Sometimes you got to give him a little kick in the butt. Right? As far as the munafiq, what does he do when it comes to him the truth? Huh? He argues. He debates. And like this, Allah clarified how we should respond to the different people. Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmah. Call to the path of your Lord using what? Wisdom. Who accepts the wisdom? The believer. He hears it. Oh, khalas, this was the hikmah I was looking for to begin with. Man, I didn't know. Jazakallah khair. Shukran, ya akhi. Wa maw'idatil hasan. Some people need a good admonition. You got to raise your voice a little bit. You got to encourage. You got to threaten. That's a believer. He's just weaker in his iman. And some people, you have to do what? وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And argue with them using what's best. Because they're not going to accept. هذا munafiq. He wants to reject the truth. Allah told us in the Quran the levels of the people and how to address them. And so he's saying about this first group, a lot of good came to them. But as is always, ثُمَّ بَلَغَنِي بِأَخِرَةٍ. Then it reached me later, بِأَخِرَةٍ. Right? بِأَخِرَةٍ. And this is a phrase that the people of hadith should know. Right? They say it all the time in the books of hadith, talking about a person, اختلط بأخرة. He got confused later on. Right? They talk about a narrator and they say he was thiqa, اختلط بأخرة. He got confused later on. Right? So we don't know if his hadith are still reliable or not because it's been unclear. Because later on he got confused. So he says, then it reached me later that from the people are those who found what I said strange. How can you find this principle strange? It's the great principle of the religion and one of the great foundations of the religion. من استغرب ذلك واستبعد. They found it strange and far-fetched. Right? It's not something, how can you say that we got to be different than the kuffar? Doesn't make any sense. That's over there. That doesn't make any sense. They found it strange and far-fetched. Why did they find it strange and far-fetched? Because of its opposition to the Quran and the Sunnah? Because it being different than the way of the Salaf? La. They found it strange and far-fetched because of its opposition to the customs that they grew up on. لِمُخَالَفَةِ عَادَةٍ قَدْ نَشَأُوا عَلَيْهَا. Because it contradicted customs that they grew up on. And that is it. These customs, we cannot allow them to be what stop us from the religion. This is the da'wah of the kuffar from old. Inna wajadna aba'ana ala ummah. We found our fathers before doing something. To be a Muslim, you have to reject those customs and those lifestyles and that culture that contradicts Islam. Right? And if you make the argument against religion using culture, then this is an argument of the people from before. They rejected it because of its opposition to customs that they grew up on. And they held on to generalities and unrestricted evidences that they based their argument on. They would use general statements from the Quran and the Sunnah, right? Something that's not specific about this topic. You want me to be different than the kuffar, right? Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum. Allah says, O mankind, worship your Lord. You want to be different than the kuffar? You want to be a kafir? It's a good argument, right? Allah says be different. You want me to be different. You telling me, Abdul Hakim, to be different from the kuffar, right? What Allah tell everybody to do? So you want me to be different than them? Allah's telling them to worship. Okay, that's not how the evidence works. Right? They use general evidence, right? Men are just like women. An-nisa shaqa'iqur rijal. Women are the counterparts of men. They're the same. So men are similar to women, right? So I can be like a woman. Ar-rijal shaqa'iqur, an-nisa shaqa'iqur rijal. Right? They're the same. They use general arguments, unrestricted arguments where they don't belong. Right? They use the evidence. So don't think that the people of innovation, don't think that the shubuhat don't have evidence. They have. That's why it's called a shubha. Right? These words we see in the. Why do they call a shubha a shubha? Because it resembles dalil. Is it like dalil? It's not like dalil, but it resembles it in one way or another. And that's why they call it shubha a shubha. He says they hold on to generalities and unrestricted statements that they base their argument upon. فَاقْتَضَانِي بَعْضُ الْأَصْحَابِ. So some of my companions required me, they demanded that I comment on that. All right? وَهَذَا مِنْ حُسْنِ الصِّحْبَةِ. This is from the good companionship. A good companion encourages to the good. Sheikh, we need you to write about this. People ain't gonna listen to nobody but you in this time. You need to write about this shit. You see what they doing? They celebrating Christmas. They celebrating Easter. They celebrating Mother's Day, Sheikh. And they still saying they Muslim. You gotta write about this shit. They're not gonna listen to Abdul Hakim. Right? People ask, why do we encourage the people to know about the scholars and to have, like the class that we just had with Sheikh Zeki. Are there in America from the brothers those who are capable of teaching Thalathatul Usul? Yes. There are people in America from the students and from the brothers, those who are able to teach Thalathatul Usul. Why do we encourage the people to participate in a video conference with somebody miles and miles away? To learn the connection to these people, to have the good companionship. If nothing else, to network and know who. When you get into a situation, you find yourself in Jordan, you find yourself in Kuwait, you find yourself in Saudi, you find yourself in Sudan, you find yourself in Pakistan, in India, you need to know, man, who can I ask? Who can I turn to? Right? So it's important that we develop good relationships. The same way that if they came to America, they would call up those who they know, right? They would say, we just landed in Texas. Do you know any good masjid here we can go to where the people are upon the sunnah, right? And so these good relationships, and they encourage each other. And like Ibn Taymiyyah, his companion, encouraged him to comment on this issue in a way that would indicate the basis of this argument, the basis of this topic, right? Give us a general clarification of, and this is why this book is so great, because this book in reality is the foundation of, we said, a couple of principles: resembling, being different, and innovation. This book serves as, if you want to know the definition of resembling, the definition of being different, and the definition of innovation, this book is one of the first books to clarify it all. We're almost done, inshallah. He says, in a way that would be that would indicate the foundations of this topic, due to the abundant benefit of it and the general gain that can be gotten by it. So this is why he wrote the book. Somebody requested him to, because of how beneficial it could be. Also, لما قد عم كثيرا من الناس من الابتلاء بذلك. Also because of how many people have succumbed to this tribulation, have fallen into this problem. And that was during his time. That was during his time in the Muslim countries of Damascus and Egypt, right? And Iraq, where, I mean, the presence of, these are the heart of the Muslim lands, right? فَكَيْفَ بِنَا? How about us nowadays, right? If the Muslims were falling succumb to this tribulation in his time, فَكَيْفَ بِنَا? How about us nowadays? So this is why he wrote the book. He says, حَتَّى صَارُوا فِي نَوْعِ جَاهِلِيَّةٍ, until they have ended up in a type of pre-Islamic ignorance. The Muslims during his time, you would find from them those who resembled the pre-Islamic condition. And then you see why we talk about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Abdul Wahhab, the same thing. He wrote a book called Masail al-Jahiliyyah. The issues that the kuffar of the past were better than the Muslims in. Right? Issues that we as Muslims do nowadays that the mushrikun of the past didn't do. If you were to ask them who created the skies and the earth, they would say what? They would say Allah. You ask the mushrik, the Muslim today, some of them, who created everything? Well, Allah created Muhammad, and then Muhammad created everything. Or Ali. You ask them who is in control of the universe, what will they say? The people in the past, what would they say? Allah. You ask some of the Muslims nowadays, who's in control of the universe? Wali Fulan, the 12 Imams, right? Masail al-Jahiliyyah, they've fallen into things that are worse or similar to the pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah. What was the cause for it? How did it start? Resembling. You let the Persians into Islam, and they brought with them that kufr. The Christians came into Islam, and they brought with them that kufr. The Jews came into Islam, and they brought with them that kufr. And the Salaf combated it all. And that's why you find that during their time period, Islam was what? Strong, apparent, obvious, as we're going to learn about in Sharh Usul I'tiqadi Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah al-Lalaka'i. But then afterwards, what happens? When they started taking a foothold and started getting dominance, all of these ideologies started creeping into the Muslims because they started copying. Or they didn't leave what they came into Islam with. They didn't get rid of that baggage. And we see that nowadays, new shahadas, especially in my community, the African American community. You find a lot of people coming into Islam with that baggage. And then we wonder why, how come when we accept Islam, it's always like something stopping us? While when you look at other cultures, you find their common people still like having a different sense of Islam. But it's because we haven't had the time or the effort or the knowledge to ingrain our new shahadas with that information, right? And they're in an environment where they're still resembling the kuffar. They're still hanging out. They're still going out. They're still doing the things. And unfortunately, from us are those who tolerate it when they act as a non-Muslim would act, instead of checking that and say, hey, this is what Muslims do. And whether that's done appropriately because of graduation and levels, or whether that's done out of a mistaken sense of tolerance, it's something that we need to be conscious of. He says that, so also I wrote this due to an abundance of people that are afflicted by this tribulation until they have fallen into a type of jahiliyyah. So I wrote what I was able to think about at that moment. This book, he wrote it in a moment. right? At a time period, it didn't take an exhaustive amount. And that's something that they used to do. They would write even without their books. A lot of times you see this is stuff that's off the top of the head. And you see the difference in scholarship. His student was no different. Ibn al-Qayyim, you guys ever heard of the book Zad al-Ma'ad, right? Depending on the print, 6 to 8 volumes. He wrote it all from memory while traveling. He wrote the whole book, one of the best books in Islam, Zad al-Ma'ad. If you don't know about it, learn about it. Zad al-Ma'ad, the provisions for the return regarding the lifestyle of the best of the worshipers. It's a similar book. He wrote it all from memory while traveling. You look at the hadith that are in it. He don't make mistakes. The ayat, he don't make mistakes, right? And sometimes he might make a mistake or two and you say, because he was traveling. 6 to 8 volumes just off of memory from traveling, right? One of the best books ever written, like Fairland. You got to read this book, and it's translated some of it. He says, so I wrote what I was able to think about at that moment, even though if I was to try to astawfi, to collect all of the evidence in that, all of the proof in that, as well as the statements of the scholars, was us-Siraat-il-Mustaqeem. And every narration about that was to be followed up on, you would have found the conversation being much more than I wrote. Meaning this book is only a portion of the conversation. And what he didn't mention is more than what he did. And you look at his sources, Dala'il, Quran and Sunnah, Kalam al-Ulama, the statement of the scholars, Al-Athar, the statements of the Salaf, right? The Sahaba, the Tabi'een. Our sources, his sources, the same sources. Last paragraph he says, and I didn't think that anybody who ever studied fiqh, I didn't think that anybody who studied Islamic law, and fiqh here can even be more general to just mean Islam in general. I didn't think that anybody who studied Islamic law, and like here he's talking about the educated. I didn't think anybody educated, right? Because this is what education was. I didn't think anybody who was a scholar, educated, who studied Islamic law and understood the indications of the religion. Meaning Allah didn't say it clearly, but you understood. For example, an indication is, he's going to mention some examples. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. That'd be clearly just an indication. Okay, an indication is, this is a different type of indication, but it's an indication. Oh, you who have iman, when the call for Jum'ah is given, then hasten to the remembrance of Allah and leave off selling. Why do you have to leave off selling? The reason you have to leave off selling is to hasten to the salah. Is that a direct statement? No, it's an indication. Why else would Allah mention hasten to the salah and leave off selling? It's implied, it's implicit in that. He didn't say leave off salah, leave off selling because you have to hasten to the salah. That's a direct statement. He said hasten to the salah and leave off selling. That's an implication, right? Color your beards because the Jews don't color their beards. What is that indicating? Be different than the Jews. Did he say be different than the Jews? No. In that hadith he didn't. In that statement he did. He said color your beards. The Jews don't color their beards. If you understood the implications of the religion, I don't even know how you would question this issue. Right? That's what he means by a person who studied fiqh, so they know how evidence works and how to prove something. They understood the implications of the religion and the goals of the religion, like we talked about, the goals, the aims of the religion. And they understood the justifications behind things. And they knew the issues, the topics of Islamic law. I didn't think anybody like this would question any of this. Because who were the people that were writing responses against him? Were they the ignorant people? No, they were the scholarship. The teachers in the universities and the schools and the masajid. I was bewildered. I was dumbfounded. How could this person who's educated argue? It's like arguing about needing wudu. I didn't think any Muslim would ever write a book refuting me to say you need to make wudu for salah. So he said, I didn't think anybody who was like this would have any doubt about this topic. I didn't think anybody would have any doubt about this topic. Instead, not only the educated, I didn't think that anybody who actually had faith established in their heart, وَقَرَ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قَلْبِهِ, Iman actually dug a hole into his heart, right? Iman actually penetrated his heart, and he was able to have the purity of Islam, the purity of the religion. He was able to accomplish the true Islam, which is the religion of Allah, the one that it will not be accepted from anyone other than it. And this is that drawing our attention back to the straight path necessitate being different. No other path will be accepted. So I didn't think anybody who Iman had dug a hole into his heart, found its way into his heart, and he was able to get the purity of Islam for himself after his attention was drawn to this nukta, to this subtle benefit, right? To this, oh, this is a good point. That's a good point. When you say nukta, that's a good point, right? A nukta. It's like a little bit, right? After their attention was drawn to this benefit, I didn't think any of them would react in any other way except that it'd be what enlivens their heart. When you hear about it, you say, oh, your Iman goes up. You feel alive. You feel like, yes, I'm back where I should be. That hearing about this topic would enliven their heart and fix their Iman. The things that they were doing before, it was like, oh, I know the principle. How do I have faith? What's the principle? What's the rule? How do I have faith? Not like the kuffar. Right? That's the rule of this book. The answer is not like the kuffar. If I understood that, because if you not have it like the kuffar, how is your faith? Like the وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسُ قَالُوا. And when it's said to them, have faith like the people have faith. They mu'mineen, right? So the point of it is that I didn't think that this topic would be anything other than that which brings life to their heart and purity, correctness to their faith. And it would cause them to wake up immediately. Right? If you were doing something that was resembling, when I brought this attention to you, I thought it would just make you automatically be like, oh, subhanAllah, I didn't even notice. We were doing this the whole time. I didn't even think about it. We were going to school from September to June. I never even tripped off that, subhanAllah. How do we celebrate the weekend? What's the beginning of the week? What's the beginning of the week? What's the beginning of the week? For them or for us? The beginning of the week for them is Monday. That's the beginning of the week. And he said, man, what's the beginning of the week? Yom al-Ahad. I didn't trip. That's why they call it Yom al-Ahad, because it's the beginning. What day do they start on? The second day. Right? Oh, no, but it's the beginning. I ain't even trip. Now that you showed me, I know what the beginning of the week is. Right? I know when the beginning, I didn't even think about it before. But now I see except that it would cause them to wake up immediately. If I'm in control, if I get to have my way, what day is my week going to start on? Yom al-Ahad. Right? My week is going to start on Yom al-Ahad. That's the beginning. That's the first day of the week. Right? That's why they call it Ahad, right? Because it's the first one, right? It's the one day. Man, that makes so much sense. I don't even know how we got confused about that. Right? So he says, except that it would cause them to wake up in the fastest way possible. They would automatically recognize. I had my family asked me about a girl wearing a charm bracelet. What do you think? A charm. You ever heard of it? You know what a charm bracelet is?
Yeah.
A charm bracelet is a bracelet that has the little pendants and things like that on it. A little heart, a little flower, something like that. What do you think? A girl wearing a charm bracelet. Girls can't wear bracelets? Well, wow. How is the charm part like the kuffar? It's just a little flower.
They decorate those things with flowers.
I mean, you mean to tell me the Sahabiyat didn't You use decorative jewelry? That's the whole point of the jewelry, to decorate.
I'm not saying it wasn't decorative. It wasn't
Is it
decorated
connected to
in the way
silk?
that the kuffar
Charm?
decorated.
Huh?
The charms connected to silk, like those.
Yeah, that's the answer. A charm is a talisman. It's a thing to protect you from something. This is charm. This has magic powers. This is enchanted, right? Is it okay to have a bracelet with a heart on it? Absolutely, do what you want to do. Absolutely. But dang, you know what I just realized? Why do they draw a heart like that? Hearts don't look like that, right? Hearts don't look like this. Why do they draw a heart like that? Huh?
Did you know that?
Did you know that hearts don't look like this?
I know that.
I mean, yeah, that's anatomy 101. But every time we want to draw I love you, what do we write? We write an eyeball and a heart and a U. Emojis, right? Eyeball, I, heart, U, right? What is that heart? Why does it look like that?
It has something to do with the Roman, does it? Or some from the
I mean, I've been drawing it my whole life.
Symbol of lust.
I don't know, but what it doesn't come from the body. Was the Sahaba draw hearts like that? Did the Muslims draw hearts like that? But nowadays, everybody draws a heart like what? So we got to figure out what? Where'd it come from? Before I let my daughter put that little heart on her necklace, I got to know, what does that heart represent? And the kuffar are evilly sneaky with it. The kuffar are evilly sneaky. Everything they got some hidden meaning behind it, some magic, some kufr, some ideology that they're trying to invoke. Even if it's just they might not worship the god of war or the god of athleticism, but know for sure that's why they put that Nike on there. Know for sure that's why they call them Nikes. They didn't call them Nikes because they just happened to cross a word. They said, what can we do to make our shoes representative of athleticism and strength and ability? I got it. You know, the Romans, they used to worship a god called Nike, and he had two wings. And what we should do, we should take one of those wings and put it as the symbol of our shoe. And it's going to invoke this concept of strength and ability. And that's going to set our shoes apart. And everybody's going to want to wear Nike so they can do what? Just do it. I like that. I like that. Marketing 101. And then here you go and, oh, look at these Nikes. Look at these. Got them new fresh J's, mashallah. And this is a sign of kufr. If I sold you the new Iblises, how many of you would buy them? I got them 2024 Iblises just came out. You say, yeah, akhi, la haram. Instead of a check mark, if it was a cross, would you walk around with it? But it's on my shoes, so it's okay. Mumkin. But do you treat your shoes like toilet shoes, or do you treat your shoes like something important and respectful? Huh? You treat them like toilet shoes? Bismillah. Take Nikes in the toilet all day long. Step and poo with them. Make wudu on them, right? You know, the dirty shibs. Bismillah, alhamdulillah. You can do that. But is that how people treat their Nikes? Put them on a shelf, separate closet, good lighting, heat controlled.
They get upset when it's dirty.
Akhi, why you just step on my shoes, huh? So we have to be conscious of these things that the Muslim, when he hears about them, he wakes up immediately. No, I can't call it Monday no more. Thursday, the store got a day, right? But I love Thursdays. I love Thor's day. SubhanAllah, al-kufr. Thor is a god that they worship. Wendy, Frida, the moon, the sun, right? These are all gods that they worship. And we just go around, oh, my favorite day of the week is the one that we worship the sun on. How many of you all would say that? My favorite day of the week is Sundays. My favorite day of the week is the week we worship the sun on. Sunday, the day we worship the sun. I forgot what 2 is, but Sunday is Sunday, Monday is Moon Day, Wednesday is Wendy's Day, Thursday is Thor's Day, Friday is Frida's Day, and Saturday was the day for Saturn, the god that they would worship. right? And we don't know what we're saying. Maybe the Prophet ﷺ, maybe a word, a person doesn't know any importance to it, he'll fall 70 years in the hellfire because of it. And now you're going to see why Shaykh al-Islam said speaking Arabic is what? Wajib. Because you say things all the time, you don't know what it means. Michael Jordan is my idol. You teach your kids this in school. Michael Jordan is my idol. Right? Other kids, they play with them. Yeah, he's my idol. They have a shrine in their house for so-and-so. You know what a shrine is? It's a place of worship. They put their picture on the wall and have a couple pictures. And when they shoot, whose name do they call on when they're trying to make a jump shot? All right? Whose name do they invoke? The Muslim, when we begin reading, we say what? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When they shoot their jump shot, they go, Kobe. Who are they calling on for help, for assistance? Wala yadrun, and they don't know. Because they've all fallen into what? Resembling the kuffar. I love this la'ib. I'm like Messi. I'm like Ronaldo. They know more about them than Abu Bakr and Umar. And then we wonder why our children sur'ani ma yatrukun al-Islam. How quick they leave Islam. And it doesn't happen with the older generation, because the older generation didn't know about these people. They had their own issues they dealt with. But the younger generations, all the TV, all the stuff that they go through, and then their children, they're going to grow up not knowing anything about Islam. What do we have to do? We have to prevent it ahead of time by understanding these principles. He says, so the Muslim wakes up right away. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ رَيْنِ الْقُلُوبِ. Wallahi, what a beautiful way to end off the introduction. We seek refuge with Allah from the blackness on our hearts. When a slave commits a sin, what happens? نُكِتَ فِيهِ نُكْتَةٌ سَوْدَاء. A black dot is placed on it. So if he makes tawbah, it's erased. But if he doesn't, another one, until his heart becomes black like an upside down cup. Nothing can get into it. فَلَا يَعْرِفُ مَعْرُوفًا وَلَا يُنْكِرُ مُنْكَرًا. So he doesn't recognize any good or disapprove of any evil. And this is what we see nowadays. What's its cause? Resembling the kuffar. Until nowadays, our hearts, we don't know the difference. You tell somebody, and like, subhanAllah, y'all gonna have to like just get up and start walking out. Because the topics, you can't stop talking about it. The Prophet told us about all of this. He told us about it. The Sahaba told us about it. And we still do it. You'll follow their example. No, I won't. Yes, I will. The Sahaba, how will you all be? Ibn Mas'ud, كيف أنتم? How will you all be? إذا لبستكم الفتنة. When the fitna overtakes you. The child grows up in it. And the old person dies on it. And if a person leaves it, they say a person left the sunnah. How will you be at that time? When you can't tell him anything about Tawheed, sunnah, it became backwards. بدأ الإسلام غريبا وسيعود غريبا. And نعوذ بالله من رين القلوب. How many, and so this, it's subhanAllah, نسأل الله أن يتوب علينا وأن يغفر لنا وأن يرحمنا وأن يطهر قلوبنا وأن يبصرنا وأن يرينا الحق حقا ويرزقنا اتباعه ويرينا الباطل باطلا ويرزقنا اجتنابه وأن يعيد المسلمين إلى الإسلام وأن يردهم إلى الإسلام ردا جميلا. Like these things are necessary. So what a good dua to close off his introduction. We seek refuge with Allah from the blackening of our hearts and from the desires of our own selves. Because that's why they do it. Why? Who would want to be like the kuffar? What good do they have? They used to walk around in high heels because their streets were full of defecation. That's the origin of high heels, right? And now our women want to wear high heels to show off. But their high heels, what was the origin of it? Because their streets were full of poop. While we were Muslims walking around in flip-flops, barefooted sometimes because it's the sunnah, streets clean. They were walking around in high heels because they had streets full of, like, this is not a joke and exaggeration. There was a layer of poo all over the streets that they had to wear high heels for. Can you imagine living in a society like that? And then these people coming to tell you you're backwards. You're a relic. You all are dirty. You all are a third world. And they'll say to you, well, that's how we were in the past before the age of enlightenment. MashaAllah, there's no more poo on the streets. Right? They got it in sewers now, MashaAllah. But is their ideology any better? They don't know truth from falsehood, fact from fiction, male from female, boy from girl, straight from gay. They have no sense. Why would we want to be like them? Well, I can get this job. I got to compromise a little bit. If I don't compromise, I can't get this. Who would take off this decoration? Who would get rid of such a beautiful thing? But I got to. My wife says she doesn't like it. Or if I go to this job, they're going to know I'm a Muslim and they're going to, I can't, I got to, just hold. Allah knows what's in here. We seek refuge with Allah from the blackening of our hearts and the desires of our own selves, the two of which, the blackening of the heart, shubuhat. When your heart can't tell right from wrong, that's the shubuhat, the unclarity, the confusion. And the desires of shahawat, the desires that an individual follows behind. The two of those things stop a person from knowing the truth. If you have a black heart, what can you not do? You don't know the truth. And if you follow your desires, it stops you from following the truth. So we seek refuge with Allah from blackening of the heart and the following of desires, the two of which prevent you from knowing the truth and following it. And that's why our dua is, Allahumma show us the truth for what it is and allow us to follow it, and show us the falsehood for what it is and allow us to avoid it. The next section, so that's the author's introduction. Alhamdulillah alladhi bi ni'matihi tatimmu salihat. Inshallah, next time we'll begin with the section of how the people were before Islam. If we said the straight path necessitates, the first thing we should know is how were they before Islam? Because when I understand that, I won't want to be like them, right? I won't want to be like them once I know how they were before Islam. And I want to be like a Muslim that Islam came with and saved them from that lifestyle. So we'll pick back up there. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.